long before the first cities rose on the banks of the Tigris or the Nile, before metal was coaxed from stone or symbols carved into clay tablets, there existed a mystery more ancient than any civilization humanity would ever build. It pulsed silently beneath the skulls of our earliest ancestors, guiding their hands as they chipped flint, steadying their feet as they stalked prey across savannas, and stirring that first inexplicable spark of curiosity that compelled them to look up at the stars. This mystery was the human brain, an organ so small it could rest neatly in the palms of those ancient hands, yet vast enough to one day imagine a world that stretched beyond the horizon. To speak of the human brain is to speak of the entire odyssey of our species, because every triumph, every myth, every invention, every whispered fear in the dead of night began as a flicker of activity inside this 3-pound constellation of neurons. The story of how humanity came to understand this enigmatic structure is a chronicle that spans continents and millennia, beginning in a time when the brain itself was considered a useless mass of fatty tissue. In ancient Egypt, where the desert wind carried the scent of embalming oils and the Nile's floods determined the rhythm of life, the heart was revered as the seat of thought, memory, and soul. When royal bodies were prepared for the afterlife, the embalmers would carefully remove the lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines, preserving them in ornate canopic jars guarded by divine symbols. But the brain, soft and unassuming, was pulled out through the nostrils with a hooked tool and discarded without ceremony. The Egyptians, pioneers of surgery and mathematics, never guessed that the wisdom of their priests, the architectural genius that raised the pyramids, and the intricate rituals inscribed on tomb walls all arose from the very organ they dismissed as superfluous. Yet elsewhere in the ancient world, different visions stirred. In Mesopotamia, the clay tablets of the Sumerians recorded omens and medical observations, and some of these texts hint at an early understanding that head injuries could alter behavior. A blow to the skull could transform a calm man into one prone to rage, or reduce a skilled artisan to someone unable to speak. These enigmatic correlations, observed by healers who had no concept of neurons or synapses, planted the seeds of a long, slow recognition that the brain held dominion over something far more profound than bodily fluids or spiritual forces. Far to the west, on the rugged shores of Greece, philosophers wrestled with the nature of thought. Alcmaeon of Croton, living in the 6th century BCE, made a radical claim. The brain was the seat of consciousness. He arrived at this idea not through divine revelation, but by dissecting animals, tracing the optic nerves back to their source, and noting that they converged within the skull. To Alcmaeon, this meant that sight, a faculty so central to human experience, must be rooted in the brain. His ideas circulated quietly at first, overshadowed by the towering influence of Aristotle, who insisted that the heart, with its warmth and rhythmic vitality, must be the throne of reason. The brain, cold and bloodless, Aristotle believed, functioned only as a cooling device for the fiery passions of the heart. Socrates pushed this tension further. In the bustling Athenian agora, surrounded by merchants, sculptors, soldiers, and politicians, he insisted that what people claimed to know was merely shadows of deeper essences. His method of relentless questioning, peeling away layers of assumption, imitation, and hearsay, was nothing less than an excavation of reality itself. Yet it was Plato, his student, who translated this idea into the most enduring metaphor of illusion humanity had ever produced. In the depths of the allegory of the cave, chained prisoners faced a wall, mistaking trembling silhouettes cast by unseen firelight for the full expanse of truth. When one escaped into the sunlit world, he realized how narrow and deceptive the shadows had been. Plato's message was not that the senses are useless, but that they offer only fragments, angles, distortions. To him, reality was the domain of forms, perfect, unchanging archetypes that lay behind every visible object, like the ultimate templates from which imperfect copies were projected. But while Greek thinkers wrestled with metaphysics, other cultures crafted equally complex visions of appearance and essence. In ancient India, the concept of Maya emerged, a cosmic illusion not meant to trick maliciously, but to veil the underlying unity of existence. Philosophers and mystics argued that the world perceived by the senses is a shimmering veil, beautiful yet deceptive, preventing beings from recognizing the deeper truth of Brahman, the singular essence of all things. The sages of the Upanishads compared human perception to a dream woven by cosmic forces, a dream so convincing that beings forget they are part of a greater totality. This idea traveled through centuries, nourishing the insights of Buddhism, where the impermanence of all things and the emptiness of inherent essence became pivotal teachings. To declare reality an illusion was not to dismiss existence, but to reveal its transient, interdependent nature, like reflections dancing upon the surface of a river that itself is always flowing. As civilizations expanded, illusions took political forms as well. In imperial China, the mandate of heaven served as an ideological lens shaping how the populace perceived their rulers. Omens, eclipses, floods, and comets were not merely natural phenomena. They were messages indicating whether an emperor still possessed the invisible legitimacy granted by cosmic order. An eclipse could destabilize a dynasty, not because the moon's shadow held real power, but because the people believed it did. In this way, perception itself became a force of governance capable of unmaking empires. The illusion was not the heavens, but the human constructions built atop them, beliefs so deeply embedded in the collective psyche that they created political realities more durable than stone.
But as Alexandria's scientific wealth waned and the Roman Empire rose, knowledge shifted once more. Roman medicine, though pragmatic and often advanced, came to rely heavily on the writings of Galen, a physician whose experiences treating gladiators gave him unparalleled opportunities to study head injuries. Galen observed that cutting certain nerves silenced the voice, stilled limbs, or robbed animals of sensation. He concluded that the brain controlled the body through these nerves, which he viewed as conduits for animal spirits, subtle substances that flowed like ethereal currents. Though flawed, his theory harmonized with both philosophical and anatomical ideas of the era, and his authority became so vast that for more than 1,000 years his writings were treated as sacred truths. As medieval Europe grappled with religious prohibitions against dissection, the brain once again receded into mystique. Yet Islamic scholars in Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba kept the flame of inquiry alive. They translated ancient texts, refined surgical techniques, and recorded clinical observations. The great physician al-Zahrawi wrote of skull fractures and their treatments, while Ibn Sina, known in the West as Avicenna, compiled an immense medical encyclopedia that described mental illness with remarkable nuance. He saw madness not as possession or moral failure, but as a condition rooted in the brain, influenced by temperament, environment, and physiological imbalance. His ideas would eventually filter into Europe, shaping the medical revival of the later Middle Ages. That revival arrived with the Renaissance, when curiosity, emboldened by art and science, pushed against old boundaries. In Florence, Padua, and Bologna, anatomists once bound by religious fear began to dissect the human form in public lectures, illuminated by flickering candlelight. And among them, like a figure drawn from myth, emerged Andreas Vesalius. Young, meticulous, and defiant, Vesalius challenged Galen's ancient dominance by pointing out the discrepancies between Galen's animal-based descriptions and the reality of human anatomy. His magnum opus, De Humani Corporis Fabrica, published in 1543, featured breathtaking illustrations that portrayed the brain with a degree of detail unmatched in history. Here, at last, the organ began to shed the cloak of mysticism and take its place as a biological marvel, awaiting explanation. Yet even as anatomical precision increased, the nature of thought remained opaque. Descartes, pondering the duality of mind and body, proposed that the pineal gland served as a bridge between the immaterial soul and the physical brain. Others speculated that the ventricles, those hollow chambers described by Herophilus centuries before, housed the faculties of imagination, memory, and reason. But these theories floated in a void of speculation, unanchored by empirical evidence. The brain's true architecture, its networks, its chemistry, the hidden electricity within remained concealed like the inner workings of a clock, whose face offered no glimpse of its gears.
As the Renaissance dawned, Europe erupted with new ways of seeing. Artists like Brunelleschi and Masaccio cracked open the gates of linear perspective, unveiling a mathematical method to create the illusion of three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional surface. Suddenly, paintings were no longer flat symbols, but windows into worlds that seemed to stretch beyond the canvas. When viewers stepped into chapels adorned with frescoes that created impossible architectures, columns that reached into non-existent heavens, domes painted with celestial illusions, they encountered art that actively challenged the boundaries between real and imagined. Perspective did not simply imitate reality. It constructed a new visual truth, one more perfect than the messy irregularities of the natural eye. This artistic revolution influenced science as well, inspiring anatomists and engineers to treat observation as a craft requiring calibration. Explorers charting the oceans relied on maps that were themselves riddled with illusion. Early cartographers combined first-hand reports with myths, hearsay, and political demands, producing maps filled with sea monsters, phantom islands, and speculative continents floating on the edges of the known world. Sailors navigating by these maps ventured into waters where the line between legend and geography blurred. When Christopher Columbus set out westward, believing he could reach Asia, his entire voyage rested on a miscalculation, an illusion born of mistaken data, flawed estimates of Earth's circumference, and faith reinforced by geopolitical aspirations. His discovery of the Americas was not the result of accurate perception, but of an historical illusion colliding with physical reality, revealing how often progress emerges not from clarity, but from misbelief. As Europe entered the scientific revolution, the illusion of reality underwent another transformation. Galileo raised his telescope toward the moon and found craters and mountains instead of the smooth celestial sphere described by Aristotle. Suddenly, the heavens, once the realm of perfection, were scarred and rugged. Then Newton crafted laws that united apples falling from trees with planets orbiting the sun, revealing that gravity itself was an invisible thread binding the cosmos in ways that contradicted everyday intuition. Reality became a lattice of forces, motions, and mathematical relationships inaccessible to the naked senses. The illusion now was not myth or imagination, but the naive belief that reality aligns naturally with human perception. The Enlightenment thinkers inherited this shifting landscape and infused it with an almost feverish confidence in reason's power to penetrate deeper than any sense could reach. Locke proposed that the mind begins as a blank slate, shaped by experience, yet he also acknowledged that those experiences themselves are only impressions filtered through senses prone to error. Berkeley flipped the notion entirely by arguing that existence itself depends on perception, suggesting that what people call material reality is nothing more than a tapestry of sensations sustained by divine observation. Hume then went further,
dismantling any certainty that cause and effect are real forces, rather than habits of association developed through repetition. To him, reality was not a structured mechanism humming with predictable laws, but a succession of impressions stitched together by the mind's desperate attempt to create continuity. Even Kant, who sought to rescue reason from its spiraling uncertainties, admitted that humans can never know the thing in itself, only the appearance shaped by categories of understanding wired into the mind. Thus, the Enlightenment, often remembered as the triumph of clarity, was equally a period of profound disorientation, where the solid world dissolved into abstractions governed by perceptual limits and mental structures that no one could escape. In the salons of Paris and the coffee houses of London, intellectuals debated these ideas with a fervor normally reserved for political unrest. Pamphlets circulated claiming that reality was merely the mind's projection, while others insisted that the senses were reliable but incomplete tools requiring augmentation. This appetite for deeper truth led inventors to devise instruments that extended human perception beyond its natural range. The microscope revealed bustling universes inside a drop of water, teeming with organisms invisible to naked eyes. The barometer exposed fluctuations in atmospheric pressure that had silently shaped weather and mood for centuries. Each new device not only uncovered previously hidden dimensions, but demonstrated how limited and illusory everyday experience truly was. The world that appeared stable, continuous, and comprehensible was in fact layered with forces and structures of astonishing complexity. In parallel, illusions took on theatrical forms that captivated entire cultures. Baroque stage designers built elaborate machines to generate storms, lightning, and miraculous apparitions. Audiences knew these effects were false, yet they willingly suspended disbelief to immerse themselves in illusions more emotionally potent than reality. The playhouse, wrote one contemporary observer, is the laboratory of perception, where artists experimented with manipulating sight, sound, and movement to explore how easily the mind constructs coherent worlds from incomplete cues. These performances were not merely entertainment, they were living demonstrations of the pliability of perception, revealing how effortlessly the brain molds sensory fragments into convincing narratives. While Freud traced symbolic landscapes, other researchers pursued the brain's biology with increasing precision. Charles Sherrington, working in England, explored the nature of reflexes and coined the term synapse to describe the microscopic gaps where neurons communicated. He likened the nervous system to a grand orchestra, with each neuron acting as a musician, responding to signals, inhibitions, and cues in a vast, dynamic performance. Sherrington's poetic metaphors resonated in a scientific era striving to articulate processes too small, fast, and complex to fully visualize. During this same period, a physician in Canada named Wilder Penfield embarked on a journey that would illuminate the brain's functional map with startling clarity. Working with patients suffering from severe epilepsy, he performed surgeries while they remained awake under local anesthesia. As he applied gentle electrical stimulation to various regions of the cortex, patients reported hearing melodies, recalling childhood scenes, or feeling sensations in distant parts of their bodies. Penfield sketched these responses into what became known as the motor and sensory homunculi, distorted human figures whose exaggerated features mirrored the brain's allocation of control and perception. These grotesque yet mesmerizing maps illustrated that the brain devoted immense resources to the hands, lips, and tongue, organs essential for manipulating tools and forming speech. Penfield's work helped dissolve lingering notions of the brain as a uniform mass. It was a land of provinces, each with distinct roles, boundaries, and dialects, united in a delicate federation. Yet even as these maps emerged, the question of how the brain generated the fluid continuity of experience remained unanswered. Scientists could stimulate isolated memories or sensations, but the secret of consciousness, that seamless integration of perception, thought, and awareness, continued to evade understanding. The mid-20th century brought with it an upheaval in scientific thought as profound as any in history. The discovery of DNA structure illuminated the genetic code, while advances in physics redefined humanity's understanding of matter and energy. Amid this intellectual ferment, neuroscience accelerated with tools more precise than anything previous generations could imagine. Electroencephalography allowed researchers to record the brain's electrical rhythms, identifying patterns associated with sleep, attention, epilepsy, and dreams. These waves, oscillating with hypnotic regularity across paper charts, hinted at the synchronized activity of vast neural networks pulsing in rhythmic harmony. Simultaneously, researchers explored how neurons communicated through chemicals that drifted across synapses like whispered messages. The discovery of neurotransmitters such as acetylcholine, serotonin, dopamine, and glutamate unveiled a molecular language governing movement, mood, learning, and reward. Each neurotransmitter shaped the brain's symphony in distinct ways, modulating circuits that influenced everything from hunger to motivation. Scientists realized that imbalances in these chemicals could produce devastating psychiatric conditions, leading to the development of early treatments for depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia. Though these interventions were crude at first, they signaled a shift. Mental disorders were not moral failings or divine punishments, but biological conditions rooted in the brain's delicate chemistry.
This understanding paved the way for perhaps the most dramatic transformation in human perception: the birth of photography. When the first daguerreotypes emerged with their uncanny precision, viewers described the images as frozen reality. Yet photographers quickly discovered ways to manipulate exposure times, angles, and chemical processes to create effects that skewed truth. Portraits softened imperfections, landscapes exaggerated drama, and staged scenes blurred the line between documentation and invention. When photographs of spirit apparitions, created through double exposures, circulated in the 19th century, entire movements of spiritualism gained credibility based on images that appeared to validate the existence of the supernatural. Photography, though rooted in optical mechanics, became a powerful instrument of illusion, capable of crafting realities more persuasive than words. Then came motion pictures, reality set into motion, yet wholly manufactured. Audiences who witnessed the Lumiere brothers' train arriving at the station reportedly panicked, believing the locomotive would burst through the screen. Film spoke directly to subconscious perception, bypassing rational filters and immersing viewers in worlds indistinguishable from memory. Directors like Méliès built fantastical scenes through jump cuts and superimpositions, pioneering visual tricks that revealed how effortlessly the mind accepts the impossible when delivered in a familiar perceptual language. Cinema evolved into a medium not only of storytelling, but of convincing simulation, offering experiences that expanded, distorted, or inverted reality with increasing sophistication. Meanwhile, scientific discoveries continued to erode the notion of a stable, objective world. Einstein's relativity shattered the universality of space and time, revealing them as flexible constructs dependent on motion and gravity. Quantum mechanics plunged deeper, exposing a subatomic domain where particles behaved like waves, where location and momentum could not be simultaneously known, and where observation itself influenced outcomes. The solid world dissolved into probability fields, energy fluctuations, and mathematical symmetries that bore little resemblance to the sensory reality humans navigate daily. Physicists confronted a universe that violated common intuition at every turn, forcing them to accept that the world of appearances is, in many ways, a convenient fiction evolved for survival rather than truth. Simultaneously, the social realm reshaped perception in ways that mirrored scientific disorientation. The rise of propaganda in the early 20th century demonstrated how governments could sculpt public perception on a massive scale. Posters, speeches, and controlled media crafted visions of national identity and enemy threat that guided populations toward war. Totalitarian regimes perfected these techniques, creating alternate realities through carefully curated images, slogans, and narratives repeated until truth became indistinguishable from fabrication. The machinery of illusion expanded beyond individual perception into collective consciousness, operating with precision once associated only with the natural limits of the senses.
The story grew more intricate when scientists explored conditions that disrupted memory. Patients like Henry Molaison, known for decades only as HM, who lost the ability to form new long-term memories after surgical removal of the hippocampus, illuminated the indispensable role this seahorse-shaped structure played in consolidating experiences. His case, though tragic, provided some of the most profound insights into how memory is forged, stored, and retrieved. The revelations from HM's life propelled scientists into new territories of inquiry, prompting them to examine memory not as a monolithic faculty, but as a tapestry woven from distinct but interlinked systems. They discovered that procedural memory, the skill embedded in riding a bicycle, playing a piano, or tying a knot, remained intact even when episodic memory faltered. This distinction hinted at the brain's layered architecture, where different regions guarded different kinds of knowledge, each resilient or fragile in its own way. The hippocampus emerged as the gatekeeper of autobiographical experience, while the basal ganglia and cerebellum carried the ghostly imprint of practiced motion, enabling the body to recall what the mind could not articulate. As the latter half of the 20th century unfolded, these discoveries converged with a renewed interest in the brain's developmental journey. Researchers began to chart how neurons migrated during fetal growth, forging circuits that shaped perception and behavior from the very first breaths of life. They observed that newborns arrived with a surplus of synaptic connections, exuberant tangles awaiting refinement through experience. As infants encountered the world, the brightness of sunlight, the murmurs of language, the warmth of a mother's touch, synapses strengthened or vanished, sculpting the brain with ruthless efficiency. This pruning process, far from being destructive, carved specialized pathways that allowed for fluent speech, nuanced emotion, and complex thought. At the same time, psychologists and neuroscientists examined how early deprivation or trauma could leave lasting imprints. Studies of children raised in understimulated environments revealed that the absence of rich sensory and emotional input constrained neural development, leading to deficits in language, memory, and social behavior. These sobering findings underscored the brain's dependence on experience, a partnership so deep that neither nature nor nurture could claim dominance. They were intertwined, inseparable threads in a single tapestry. But the brain's dependence on experience did not end with childhood. Scientists studying stroke rehabilitation discovered that adult brains retained a surprising capacity for reorganization. Through therapy, practice, and relentless repetition, patients could reclaim abilities once believed lost forever. Some relearned to speak, others regained control of their limbs, and a few even rewired sensory systems to compensate for permanent damage. This neuroplasticity, once thought limited to early years, revealed itself as a lifelong companion, a testament to the brain's adaptability, resilience, and relentless drive toward function. While clinicians explored healing and rehabilitation, other researchers ventured into the mysterious territory of perception. They sought to understand how the brain interpreted the world
from the cacophony of signals delivered by the senses. Visual neuroscientists unraveled the astonishing complexity of sight, discovering that the eyes captured not a unified picture, but fragments of light, color, edges, and motion. These fragments traveled to the brain's visual cortex, where specialized neurons processed each element in parallel before synthesizing them into coherent experience. The illusion of seamless vision emerged not from the eye itself, but from the coordinated dance of neurons interpreting an ever-shifting mosaic of data. In the realm of audition, scientists uncovered similar marvels. The ear translated airborne vibrations into electrical impulses that traveled to the auditory cortex, where timing, frequency, and intensity were parsed with exquisite precision. The brain's ability to distinguish a familiar voice in a crowded room, or to detect the faintest shift in tone during a piece of music, demonstrated its extraordinary sensitivity. Researchers found that musicians, through years of disciplined practice, physically reshaped areas of their auditory cortex, enhancing their ability to parse subtle harmonies and complex rhythms. Experience once again sculpted the brain's architecture like a skilled artisan shaping clay. Beyond individual sensory systems, neuroscientists delved into the brain's ability to integrate information from multiple sources. They discovered regions dedicated to binding sight with sound, sound with touch, and touch with proprioception, the sense of one's own body in space. These multisensory regions enabled humans to navigate complex environments, interpret nuanced social cues, and interact smoothly with the world. When these systems malfunctioned, as in certain neurodevelopmental disorders, individuals experienced sensory overload or fragmentation, highlighting the immense complexity behind everyday perception. Parallel to sensory research, the study of emotion underwent a profound transformation. For centuries, emotion was considered a disruptive force, an obstacle to rational thought. But neuroscientists began to uncover the intricate networks that gave rise to feelings, revealing them as essential components of decision-making, memory, and social interaction. The limbic system, with structures like the amygdala and hippocampus at its core, emerged as a central hub for emotional processing. The amygdala, small yet powerful, played a crucial role in fear responses, enabling organisms to detect threats with astonishing speed. But it also shaped learning, attention, and social judgment, linking emotion to every corner of cognition. The prefrontal cortex, sprawling across the brain's frontal lobes, emerged as the seat of executive function, regulating impulses, planning for the future, and orchestrating complex behaviors. Its interactions with the limbic system formed a delicate balance between emotion and reason, allowing humans to weigh risks, navigate conflict, and build cooperative societies. This balance, researchers found, could be disrupted by stress, trauma, or neurological conditions, altering decision-making and behavior in profound ways.
At the same time, scientific advances continued to erode the sense of a stable, objective universe. Cosmologists discovered that visible matter constitutes only a small fraction of the cosmos, with dark matter and dark energy composing the rest, entities inferred through gravitational effects and cosmic expansion rather than direct detection. The universe revealed itself as a vast stage whose most influential players remain unseen. Meanwhile, experiments in quantum entanglement showed that particles separated by enormous distances could behave as though connected instantaneously, challenging classical notions of locality and causation. The deeper scientists probed, the more reality resembled an intricate architecture of relationships and probabilities rather than a collection of discrete objects. Virtual reality technology advanced rapidly, offering immersive environments where sensory input could be entirely engineered. Early headsets produced rudimentary landscapes, but within years, developers rendered worlds so detailed that users found themselves instinctively ducking from virtual obstacles or reaching toward illusory objects. Researchers observed how quickly the brain accepts virtual limbs as extensions of the body, how readily the sense of presence transfers to environments that exist only as computational processes. This adaptability, once an evolutionary advantage, revealed itself as a vulnerability as well. If the brain can feel at home in a simulated world, then the distinction between reality and illusion becomes a matter not of experience, but of context. Artificial intelligence introduced yet another layer of complexity. Algorithms capable of generating text, images, and videos learned to mimic human expression with uncanny accuracy. Deepfake technology produced synthetic faces and voices capable of saying things no person ever said, performing actions they never took, inhabiting worlds that never existed. These creations did not merely distort truth, they bypassed traditional markers of authenticity, making it increasingly difficult to determine what had actually occurred. As AI systems learn to predict preferences, anticipate desires, and tailor information flows to individuals, the experience of reality became increasingly mediated by statistical inference. One could no longer be sure whether an article was written by a journalist, an image captured by a camera, or a conversation guided by a human mind. Meanwhile, neuroscientists exploring the nature of consciousness encountered phenomena that blurred the boundary between perception and imagination. Studies on hallucinations, both pathological and induced, revealed that the brain's sensory regions can activate without external stimuli, producing experiences indistinguishable from real perception. Experiments with sensory deprivation demonstrated how the mind fills the void with images,
sounds, and narratives to maintain coherence. Research on dreams uncovered neurological patterns that mirror waking consciousness so closely that some sleepers become aware within the dream and navigate it as though traversing a second reality. These findings illustrated that the mind's capacity to generate convincing worlds is intrinsic, not exceptional. That the line between reality and illusion is a gradient rather than a divide.
As the new millennium dawned, neuroscientists found themselves armed with technologies that previous generations could scarcely imagine. Tools capable of tracking single molecules in real time revealed the minute choreography of receptors, channels, and signaling cascades that governed synaptic transmission. Microscopes enhanced by fluorescent proteins illuminated living neurons as they forged new connections or pruned old ones, their branching dendrites glowing like constellations shifting across a cosmic night. With each advance, the brain became not only a subject of study, but a landscape rendered in ever finer resolution. A terrain whose secrets, once hidden in darkness, now shimmered under the lens of molecular precision. In laboratories spanning continents, researchers mapped the connectome, the vast web of neural pathways interlinking the brain's regions into a single dynamic system. This undertaking, comparable in ambition to mapping the human genome, sought nothing less than a complete chart of the brain's wiring. Early connectomic studies revealed an architecture both orderly and chaotic, where densely packed hubs formed the backbone of cognition, while remote regions communicated through long-range fibers that acted like highways of thought. These structural maps illuminated fundamental principles of neural organization, demonstrating that the brain's complexity stemmed not only from its billions of neurons, but from the trillions of synapses weaving them into an intricate tapestry. Meanwhile, the study of consciousness, that elusive phenomenon which had haunted philosophers for millennia, found new footholds in neuroscience. Through careful experimentation, researchers identified networks associated with wakefulness, attention, and self-awareness. The default mode network, active during introspective thought, daydreaming, and memory retrieval, emerged as a major player in shaping the flow of consciousness. Scientists observed how this network quieted during tasks requiring focused attention, only to reignite when the mind wandered inward, revealing the shifting balance between external engagement and internal reflection. Though far from solving the riddle of subjective experience, these findings offered tantalizing glimpses into the neural correlates of thought itself. At the same time, advances in neuroimaging allowed researchers to explore the brain's response to art, music, and storytelling. They discovered that listening to a symphony activated not only auditory regions, but also networks involved in emotion, movement, and memory, illustrating how deeply music intertwined with human biology. Visual art stimulated areas associated with pattern recognition, aesthetic judgment, and reward. These studies demonstrated that creativity was not confined to a single region, but arose from the interplay of multiple circuits,
a symphony of neural processes echoing the very works they produced. While art and emotion lit up the brain in captivating patterns, the study of decision-making uncovered the quiet machinery behind choices, risk assessment, and moral judgment. Researchers used economic games, dilemmas, and simulations to reveal how competing neural systems weighed reward against danger, impulse against restraint. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex, orbitofrontal cortex, and striatum emerged as central nodes in guiding behavior, integrating information about value, probability, and social consequence. These findings challenged long-held assumptions about free will, highlighting the extent to which subconscious processes shaped decisions before conscious awareness emerged.
But as neuroscientists probed deeper into cognition, they also confronted the darker corners of the human mind. Studies of aggression, addiction, and compulsive behavior revealed how disruptions in neural circuitry could drive individuals toward self-destructive or harmful actions. Addiction, once viewed through moralistic lenses, emerged as a chronic disorder rooted in neural pathways governing reward, motivation, and learning. The hijacking of dopamine circuits by drugs, gambling, or digital stimuli illustrated how powerful feedback loops could reshape behavior. Understanding these mechanisms sparked ongoing debates about responsibility, vulnerability, and the fragile boundary between choice and compulsion. Parallel to these explorations, social neuroscience blossomed into a field dedicated to understanding how the brain navigated complex interpersonal worlds. Researchers found that social rejection activated neural regions associated with physical pain, suggesting that the agony of exclusion was not merely metaphorical, but deeply biological. Oxytocin and vasopressin, hormones involved in bonding and trust, played prominent roles in shaping social behavior, linking maternal care, pair bonding, and cooperation to molecular pathways millions of years old. These discoveries emphasized that human society, with its alliances, families, friendships, and conflicts, rested upon neural circuits sculpted across eons of evolution. While modern neuroscience uncovered the biological roots of behavior, evolutionary biology traced the brain's origins across deep time. Fossils of early hominins revealed how cranial capacity expanded over millions of years, from the modest brains of Australopithecus to the increasingly complex structures of Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and finally, Homo sapiens. Endocasts, the internal impressions of ancient skulls, offered hints about the reorganization of cortical regions and the emergence of language, tool use, and symbolic thought. Evolutionary pressures such as hunting, social cooperation, and environmental adaptation shaped not only brain size, but also cortical specialization. These discoveries illuminated
how natural selection guided the emergence of cognition, memory, and creativity long before written language or civilization took form. Amid the study of evolution, researchers also probed the development of language, one of the brain's most remarkable achievements. They investigated how infants acquired speech with astonishing speed, absorbing phonemes, grammar, and vocabulary from the ambient air. This capacity stemmed from specialized neural networks, including Broca's and Wernicke's areas, which coordinated the perception and production of language. Comparative studies of birdsong, primate communication, and cetacean vocalization revealed both parallels and distinctions, offering insights into the evolutionary pathways that led to human linguistic mastery. The question of how language shaped thought and whether thought could exist without language fueled intense debate, connecting neuroscience with anthropology, linguistics, and philosophy.
As the 21st century advanced, new frontiers emerged at the intersection of neuroscience and technology. Brain-computer interfaces, once the stuff of science fiction, became experimental realities. Researchers implanted electrodes that allowed paralyzed patients to control robotic limbs with their thoughts, enabling movement through purely neural intention. Others developed non-invasive interfaces that interpreted electrical patterns to decode basic speech, imagery, or emotion. These milestones demonstrated that the brain's language, though intricate, could be translated by algorithms and machinery. They hinted at a future where neural communication extended beyond the boundaries of biology. At the same time, optogenetics, a technique that allowed neurons to be activated or silenced using light, transformed neuroscience into a discipline with unprecedented precision. By implanting light-sensitive proteins into specific neural circuits, researchers manipulated behavior in animals with a level of control once unimaginable. They could trigger memories, suppress fear responses, or induce motor actions with the flick of a switch. This ability to modulate individual pathways illuminated the causal relationships between neural circuits and behavior, deepening understanding while raising profound ethical questions. Ethics, in fact, became increasingly entwined with neuroscience as the field progressed. Breakthroughs in brain imaging, decoding, and intervention challenged traditional notions of privacy, autonomy, and identity. If neural activity could reveal intentions before they became actions, what did this mean for legal responsibility? If memories could be altered or erased, how would society recalibrate justice, trauma, or accountability? As scientists ventured further into the biological core of the self, philosophers, ethicists, and policymakers grappled with the implications of unprecedented access to the mechanisms of thought. Concurrently, globalization enabled neuroscience to expand beyond Western paradigms. Indigenous knowledge systems, contemplative traditions, and cross-cultural studies enriched understanding of how different societies shaped and interpreted the mind. Meditation research,
once fringe, revealed how sustained practice altered neural activity, enhanced emotional regulation, and remodeled structural networks. These findings bridged ancient wisdom with modern science, offering a holistic view of cognition that integrated biological, psychological, and cultural dimensions. All the while, artificial intelligence rapidly matured. Deep learning algorithms, inspired loosely by biological neural networks, demonstrated capabilities that startled even their creators. They recognized patterns, translated languages, generated art, and solved problems once reserved for human intellect. Yet the differences between silicon networks and biological brains remained immense. AI lacked emotions, lived experience, embodiment, and the organic complexity of 86 billion living neurons learning through chemical, electrical, and experiential interplay. The contrast between artificial and biological intelligence sparked new inquiries into what made human cognition so flexible, intuitive, and context-sensitive. Even as AI advanced, the brain remained the most sophisticated learning system known. Researchers studying reinforcement learning, memory consolidation, and prediction error discovered that the brain constantly built models of the world, updating them with each new experience. This predictive processing framework redefined perception as an interplay between expectation and sensation, where the brain continually generated hypotheses about reality and tested them against incoming data. Such insights promised to redefine everything from psychiatric treatment to machine learning. And yet, despite these stunning advances, vast mysteries still loomed. Consciousness, creativity, dreams, and the nature of subjective experience remained partly veiled, their neural underpinnings revealed only in fragments. But each discovery, each incremental breakthrough, pushed humanity closer to understanding how this compact organ, nestled in bone and nourished by blood, could produce thought, emotion, identity, and imagination. As neuroscientists confronted the frontiers that remained, their efforts began to span scales so vast and so minute that entire disciplines emerged to bridge them. On one end of this spectrum, computational neuroscientists constructed vast models that simulated millions of neurons interacting across virtual cortices, attempting to recreate the emergence of perception, learning, or decision-making. On the other, molecular biologists traced the intricate pathways through which single genes influenced the folding of proteins, the mobility of receptors, or the resilience of synapses. Between these extremes lay the cellular ecologists of the brain, researchers studying glial cells, once dismissed as passive scaffolding, but now recognized as active participants in neural communication. Astrocytes shaped blood flow, modulated synaptic transmission, and orchestrated metabolic support, while microglia patrolled the neural forests like vigilant sentinels, pruning synapses, responding to injury, and maintaining a delicate balance between protection and inflammation. These revelations shattered the simplistic image of neurons acting alone, replacing it with a vision of the brain as a symbiotic ecosystem, a thriving biological metropolis where each cell type played a role in sustaining the whole. As this more holistic view emerged, attention turned to the rhythms that pulsed throughout the brain. Oscillations, alpha waves, theta waves, gamma bursts revealed themselves as more than mere background noise. They acted as temporal scaffolds that synchronized distant neural regions, allowing information to pass seamlessly across the brain's sprawling networks. Researchers found that these rhythms shifted with cognitive state, theta waves rising during navigation or memory formation, gamma waves surging during heightened attention or complex integration. The brain, it became clear, communicated not only through the firing of individual neurons, but through the choreography of entire ensembles, synchronizing and desynchronizing in patterns reminiscent of music. These rhythms suggested new ways of understanding thought, perception, and even psychiatric illness, pointing toward therapies that might one day recalibrate maladaptive oscillations rather than altering individual neurotransmitters.
Amid these explorations, sleep emerged as a frontier rich with secrets. Once considered a passive state, sleep revealed itself as a time of intense neural activity, a nightly recalibration essential for memory consolidation, metabolic clearance, and emotional regulation. Slow-wave sleep allowed the brain to sift through the debris of daily experience, strengthening important memories while discarding trivial ones. REM sleep, with its vivid dreams and rapid eye movements, catalyzed creativity, problem-solving, and emotional processing. The glymphatic system, a hidden network that flushed metabolic waste during slumber, illuminated why chronic sleep deprivation proved so damaging, linking disrupted rest to cognitive decline, emotional dysregulation, and neurodegenerative risk. Sleep, in its quiet mystery, proved to be one of the brain's most vital, yet most fragile processes. As neuroscientists traced the contours of sleep, attention, memory, and emotion, another domain awaited exploration: the relationship between the brain and the body. Far from being an isolated command center, the brain maintained a ceaseless dialogue with the immune system, the digestive tract, and the endocrine glands. The gut microbiome, a teeming world of bacteria, viruses, and fungi, influenced neural development, mood, and even behavior, its chemical messages traveling through the vagus nerve like emissaries from a distant province.
Hormones such as cortisol, adrenaline, and oxytocin shaped stress responses, bonding, and social interaction. These discoveries dissolved the old dichotomy between mind and body, revealing instead a continuous loop of influence and adaptation. Mental health, long confined to psychological frameworks, expanded into a broader understanding of physiology, microbiology, and systemic balance. Meanwhile, technological innovation accelerated at a dizzying pace. Miniaturized electrodes recorded the firing of thousands of neurons simultaneously, capturing the neural signatures of intention, memory retrieval, or sensory perception in unprecedented detail. CRISPR gene editing enabled scientists to alter neural circuits with surgical precision, offering new tools to explore disease mechanisms and potential therapies. High-resolution connectomes mapped the synaptic landscape of tiny organisms, such as the fruit fly or the nematode worm, laying the groundwork for the far more ambitious task of mapping the human brain in its entirety. These efforts, though monumental, reflected a growing conviction that understanding the brain demanded both microscopic detail and macroscopic context, both molecular mechanistic insight and sweeping systems-level perspective. But even as tools grew more sophisticated, the brain retained its capacity to astonish. Studies of meditation practitioners revealed structural and functional changes that defied assumptions about neural rigidity. Long-term practitioners showed enhanced connectivity in regions involved in attention and emotional regulation, as well as altered patterns of neural oscillation. Their experiences of heightened awareness, reduced reactivity, or profound inner stillness found echoes in measurable neural activity, knitting together subjective and objective worlds. These findings fueled a renaissance of contemplative science, bridging traditions thousands of years old with cutting-edge neuroscience.
In parallel, research into psychedelics reopened after decades of dormancy. Compounds such as psilocybin and LSD, once relegated to the fringes, entered clinical trials exploring their effects on depression, trauma, addiction, and end-of-life anxiety. Neuroimaging revealed that these substances temporarily dissolved rigid neural patterns, quieting the default mode network and enhancing connectivity across distant brain regions. These states offered clues about consciousness, flexibility, and the brain's capacity for transformation, prompting new debates about therapeutic intervention and the nature of the self. As neuroscience broadened its horizons, humanity began to grapple with the societal implications of future discoveries. If the biological basis of memory could be manipulated, how might justice systems adapt? If brain-computer interfaces allowed communication through neural signals alone, what new forms of expression and connection might emerge? If artificial intelligence surpassed human capabilities in certain domains, how would the brain's uniqueness be defined, preserved, or reconsidered? These questions hovered like uncharted constellations, awaiting exploration by scientists, philosophers, and policymakers alike. And yet, despite these uncertainties, the story of the human brain continued to unfold with a sense of profound continuity, an unbroken thread stretching from ancient healers observing battlefield wounds to modern researchers sequencing genes, decoding circuits, and building machines inspired by neural architecture. Each generation added new layers of understanding, revealing the brain as an organ shaped by evolution, experience, culture, and imagination. It was both a biological engine and a vessel of dreams, a structure bound by physical laws, yet capable of transcending them through art, science, and wonder. And as the journey of discovery pressed onward, the brain remained what it had always been, a frontier vast enough to hold the entire human story, and still spacious enough to harbor mysteries yet unknown.